I'm Jerry Kruger, president of IABC Lincoln chapter, and on behalf of the IABC Lincoln board, welcome to our June professional development luncheon. Thank you for coming. We're glad to see everyone here. Today's topic is communicating across cultures. And when I saw that title, the first thing I thought was, I'm going to learn how to communicate with teenagers. But that's not what this is about. The ability to communicate effectively in cross-cultural settings is a must for communication professionals, for all professionals really. Using case studies and real-life examples, our presenter, Professor Dipra Jha, did I pronounce that correctly?
Correct.
Will teach us how to navigate while communicating across cultures. We are pleased to welcome back Professor Jha as our guest speaker this afternoon. Dipra is a professor of practice and director of global engagement for hospitality, restaurant, and tourism management program at UNL. He is recognized as an expert in the tourism and luxury hospitality industry and does collaborative work with communities, municipalities, as well as private sector organizations in the United States and overseas. Within Nebraska, his clients include the Nebraska Tourism Commission, Nebraska Association of Bed and Breakfast, the City of Grand Island, and the Center for Rural Affairs, among others. He is currently leading a tourism-based community revitalization project for Nebraska City. So when you see the announcement in the next couple of years that they're breaking ground for the new international airport in Nebraska City, you'll know who's the guy that got that ball rolling. Wow. He is a recipient of this year's Outstanding Teaching Award from UNL's College of Education and Human Sciences. Today, Dipra will be presenting on cross-cultural communication. We are very glad he is able to join us for our luncheon, and we look forward to his presentation. Help me welcome Dipra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Jerry, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me back. Some of the faces are familiar from last year, and some new faces. So greetings to all of you. My last foreign visit was to Iowa. And then the last ethnic food I ate was, of course, Whole Foods, where I eat most of the time anyway. What I want to do today is kind of talk about communicating across cultures, especially my personal experience, because I travel a lot and I speak at various meetings, conferences, or other projects around the world. So some of the things that I have learned, some of the things that I did wrong, or some of the things that I learned from doing, having people to guide me through in some of the situations I have been in. So I hope that today's presentation kind of helps you from a practice-based approach, because all of you are practitioners in terms of the communication business, to kind of see where communication is going, and in the context of culture, in the context of gender, in the context of technology, and all of that. And at any point during my presentation, if you have a question, a comment, or something like that, please feel free to stop me and ask a question. I like to make this as conversational and as interactive as possible. The picture on the title slide is a picture of my students. I took a group of students on an education abroad program to India 3 years ago in 2013, and here they are, all of the ladies, all of the female students in that group getting henna painted on their hands in a place called Jaipur, the city of palaces in India. It's an absolutely fabulous experience. It was one of the most successful education programs we have done, and so we are actually going back this year, this December, with a larger group and a more of an interdisciplinary group. So in the context of the discipline I teach, hospitality tourism management, it is a global discipline and it's a global business. You can be managing a small bed and breakfast in western Nebraska, but think about places like North Platte, where we have guests from Germany who come to see the trains. So in a small hotel like that, you might be having a population of people who are from a completely foreign country and foreign culture, and how do you communicate with them? How do we interact with them in the context of the globalization that we are all kind of living in? So the first thing that I'd like to kind of point out, that we live in, of course, in an interconnected and global society. So global and interconnected are two different things, in a sense that when we talk about interconnectedness, we are not talking only about technology, we are also talking about some of the common aspirations. Think of the largest brands in the world. Like owning an iPhone is not only an aspiration here in the United States, it's an aspiration almost across the world, whether it is China, whether it's in India, whether it's one of the larger countries. So when we talk about interconnectivity, we are seeing now a convergence of those aspirations across the world, and some of these global companies and technology and brands are enabling us to do that. And in terms of the jobs or careers that we, or even the future generations are going to be engaging in, we know that 21st century careers require a high level of what we call global competence. And global competence is something that we are now talking a lot about in the business that I am in the business of higher education, because we want our students not only to know, but also to be able to do, and to be able to do at a world stage. So it doesn't matter if my student is working here in Lincoln, Nebraska, or traveling to Iowa, or they're living and working in New York, or they're living in China or Brazil or wherever. We want them to have a set of competencies which we call global competencies that they are able to use in their professional careers. And the education abroad programming that we do, especially in our program, has got a lot to do with that. So essentially, when I'm saying that I'm taking a group of students to India or wherever else, it is not a junket. It is just not a vacation. It's much more than. It's a very intense learning opportunity, immersing the students into a different culture, having them interact and look at simple different things. I mean, how do you order McDonald's in India, compared to how you order here? What are some of the connotations? Like the first question, like when we were ordering McDonald's in India, what's that little thing that they're giving with us? Because there, a lot of you are fond of Indian food, it seems, in this room. The food is spicy, but how do you spice up French fries? So what they do is give that French fries to you in a packet, and then little sachets of spicy powder. You open the packet, rip out the little sachet, put the spice in, and shake it. Here you go, spicy fries, right? So same McDonald's brand, but how do you navigate that in a brandscape of global brands? So it's very important for our students to understand that it could be the same Starbucks or the same McDonald's that they're engaging with, but there are connotations and there are nuances depending on what culture they are operating in. And talking about McDonald's, once again, like in India, McDonald's burgers are not made from beef or pork, because the majority of the population there does not eat beef. The Muslims don't eat pork. Who can tell me what would be the number one selling burger of McDonald's in India? Veggie burger. Veggie burger. And meat burgers are made of chicken, essentially. So once again, understanding the connotation that if you are going to ask for a beef burger in a country like that, that could set off cultural and other kinds of issues. Then also, the ability to function and communicate and lead in a cross-cultural situation. That what we call the concept of not only interpersonal skills, but also as professionals, are we developing enough emotional intelligence and situational intelligence? The example I gave of that knowing what to order in what context and kind of what not to do comes from a combination of both emotional intelligence and situational intelligence. And I will give you examples and share stories with you to kind of show how this kind of operates. But before I do that, it is important to kind of look at the context of culture in communication. Probably many of you are familiar with Hall's theory of the low context versus high context cultures. And this is very important in terms of understanding that how to communicate in given cultures. When we talk about low context cultures, these are much more task-oriented cultures where logic, facts, directness, these things are important when you are communicating in those cultures. That means, you don't bloviate, you just do not beat around the bush unnecessarily, be succinct, be brief, be to the point, get your work done, and that's the end of it. So examples of that would be North America and Western Europe. Say somebody mentioned that they have been to Germany, and so Germany is a classic example of a real low context culture. As a matter of fact, in a sense that they're very direct. As a matter of fact, if you get a haircut, I don't have that problem, and ask your German friend, how do I look? If according to them you don't look that great, they will tell it straight on your face. Oh, I think you look ugly. I mean, they're not going to say you look ugly, and they're going to say that I don't think this cut looks very, very, very good on you. Compared to a high context culture, it's much more relationship oriented. In a high context culture, people do not like to offend others. So, I mean, even within the United States, think of the difference between communicating in New York versus communicating in the Midwest. Many times when I take students to New York, sometimes I'll hear this, oh my God, people here are like so rude. They're not rude. They are just, it's a time-poor society. They just like to be succinct, brief, to the point, and they're just being New Yorkish. So, which is different from, say, I used to live in Wisconsin and then North Dakota, so I'm very familiar with the concept of Minnesota nice, that, they always say that they take forever to say goodbyes. That means, it is a whole concept of that, it's very kumbaya, it's very relationship orientated, and that is a concept of high context cultures. The great example of that would be essentially Asia, Middle East, Africa, South America. I mean, if you have traveled in Latin American countries, Brazil and many of those places, people are very warm, they're very friendly, and also certain kinds of things like time is a fluid commodity. Last week, I had a visiting scholar from Hungary, Europe, who was spending the week with us, and I was her host, and I was trying to explain to her the concept of Midwestern non-tardiness, that 5 minutes early is on time, right? So because it is very important for people who are not raised in that culture, many of them may not be aware that like especially in many cultures, it is okay for you to invite a friend and they will say, okay, what time should I come for dinner? You say 7-ish. It could mean anything starting from 7 to 7:45, right? And in given cultures, it's absolutely okay. In Latin American cultures, it's absolutely okay. If you show up at a dot at 7 o'clock, or if you're a Midwesterner, show up there at 6:55, the person may not have started cooking yet, right? So I'm just saying, so in the context of culture, it's very important to understand how you are communicating. I was talking to a couple of my colleagues who are traveling with me this time to India, and we are creating the content to basically prepare our students for this trip this fall, and how people communicate in certain cultures. Like, I grew up in India, but I have lived in the US for a very long time, so these kinds of things have now started bothering me. Say an example is that if you are a visitor or a guest in India, you are having a business meeting, you are saying something, everybody will nod their head, and you will think that, oh my goodness, they are all in agreement with me. They are not nodding because they're agreeing with you, they are just nodding because they are just being polite, right? So there is a huge difference. Here in the United States, if we do not agree, we will probably not nod, we will just directly give our feedback or say that I hear what you are saying, but this is my point of view. But in many cultures, especially with people of authority, you do not make eye contact, you do not directly confront them, or you do not say anything that will be construed as that you are kind of undermining their authority. So what they're acting out of politeness may be sometimes viewed incorrectly as they are in agreement of what the speaker is saying. So it is an absolutely fascinating thing to actually navigate the world of cross-cultural communication. And as we are becoming more and more globalized, as we are becoming more and more interconnected, having at least a preliminary or a fundamental knowledge of these things can really be helpful. It is just not possible to know everything about every culture. That's not the point. The point is that are you training yourself as a professional to be more have a better emotional intelligence, as well as have a better situational intelligence about the clients or the people or the consumers or even the audience that you are dealing with. Now, what does that mean? I mean, that means, when I'm doing a presentation in Bangkok, Thailand, I will start the presentation on a very different note. There will be elaborate introductions. I will not address anybody by their first name. Say in Thailand, as a mark of respect, I mean they always add the word kun. So I would say, Kun Jerry, thank you for inviting me, and those kinds of things. And also at the end of my presentation, I'd make sure that I fold my hands and tilt my head and thank them for doing that. Simple kinds of things that really go a long way in that context. And this is very different from how I would even pan out my presentation, where when I'm doing a presentation, say where the next international airport is going to be in Nebraska City, here we will start at 7:55 in the morning, and then whatever breaks will be 15 minutes. If you try to do 15 minutes break in many cultures, they will say, what's wrong with you? I mean, I won't even have the time to go use the restrooms and, visit with my friend and colleague in 15 minutes. So, lunches are usually 90 minutes, breaks are 30 minutes. So even how you basically plan a program in those cultures are going to be very, very, very different than, when I'm doing a day-long workshop with all the people, say in Nebraska City or Vegas or in many of the other places that I travel to in the United States. And also, we are not only talking about timeliness, also things like when you are operating in cultures or places where the society is much more traditional, much more conservative. You have to also be very careful about what you say, how you say it, and those kinds of things. I do a lot of work in the Middle East. I travel to the Middle East a lot. So when I am presenting at the World Tourism Day celebrations in Muscat, Oman, as you see, this is a very traditional country. In a sense, it is ruled by a monarch, a king. So there is no democracy here. You have to also take into consideration that what are some of the things that you can build it into a presentation. What level of criticism will be tolerated or not tolerated, and what kind of language you can use or not use. Humor is very important, but humor, when not used correctly, could be very damaging. You have to understand humor is also very contextual. What can be funny in the context of the American Midwest may not be funny even in other parts of the US, and forget about other parts of the world. So if you are communicating or even in a business meeting with a group of people here in a much more traditional, formal, conservative country, do not use humor, because you do not know how it is going to be perceived. They might perceive you as trivial, as someone who lacks the depth of communicating properly, or all other kinds of things. It could also be picked up as a sign of disrespect, that why are you joking with me? I don't even know you, so that kind of stuff. But that is what makes communicating across cultures so interesting, in a sense that as I do this over the world, I always ask myself, every time when I'm going into a new destination or talking to a new audience, that what would be more appropriate. And so this is basically the intercultural communication kit that could be very helpful. And here we are talking in the context of a globalized world and going into another country or culture, but these kinds of things can be used actually even when you are operating in a local culture. I'm sure that the businesses that you work for, like Kurt, you are a banker here. I'm sure you have different kinds of clients who come in. Probably the needs of a Hispanic client is different from from certain other groups, or probably an Asian client is somewhat different from some of the other groups. And how do you actually communicate with these kinds of people? And especially in the business that I teach, which is hospitality tourism management, that communication, especially intercultural communication, is actually a currency. It can essentially kind of make or break your business if you do not understand what you are doing, or what kind of communication you are putting out. So I want to share a couple of stories with you, and so basically show you that how culture operates across boundaries. So the first one is, I mentioned that I am doing a lot of work in the Middle East. This is I travel to this country called Oman. Anybody here has been to Oman? Good. Then you do not have any idea what I'm talking about. That is because that is important. That is important, because for the next exercise that we are going to do. Oman is a country in the Middle East. It borders Saudi Arabia on one side, and then the United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is located, on the other side. Like I said, it's a monarchy. It's a small country, but extremely beautiful. UNL has actually identified Oman as one of the strategic partners, one of the countries for strategic engagement. So there is a lot of effort that we are actually expending on behalf of UNL in that country. So like I said, that it is it's a monarchy. They have a sultan or a king who basically rules the country, but he's a very pragmatic person. And here's an example of his pragmatism. After 9/11, Sultan Qaboos decided that they needed to do something to bridge the divide or the distrust between the Western world and the Islamic or the Middle East. So he commissioned to create the Royal Opera House. So there in the Middle East, they have one of the finest opera houses in the world, and they have now copyrighted the opera Turandot. So, and it's an absolutely spectacular building to go into. So it was created, after 9/11. So that's his gift to the world, in a sense, to bridge, the divide and the distrust between the Western world and the Islamic world. So before I continue with my story, I want to play a short video to give you a sense of what the country is like, and then we can talk a little bit more. In tourism, we call this destination image. Like when you look at or think of a country, what image jumps in your mind? And then I'm going to ask you to kind of comment on what you thought after watching this video.
I wish you a pleasant stay home.
Two words. What's the first word or the first thing that comes to your mind? Beautiful.
Varied.
Varied. Friendly.
Hotter than here.
Hotter than here? Yeah, of course. What else? Beautiful, friendly, hotter than here. Exotic. So, as a matter of fact, TripAdvisor has actually announced the country of Oman as the next big thing in absolutely, yeah, deep tradition and culture, a lot of pride in their own heritage and in their culture. So, and the country looks exactly like what you saw in the video. It was not some camera angle showing you absolutely empty beaches, because in their culture, going to the beaches is not a part of the culture. So they have the best, incredible ocean fronts that I've ever seen in my life, and absolutely empty. I mean, it is spectacular in every shape or form, and especially when you are a monarchy, you can actually pass a decree and get a lot of things done. For example, the city of Muscat is actually on the water, it's on the ocean, but it also has mountains. And so the ruler, Sultan Qaboos, decreed that you cannot build more than 7 floors in that city so that there is no visual pollution. So, you know, and so it is spectacular. So the whole thing, when you are driving in from the airport, I mean, you know that, and also there you can only paint the buildings in certain colors. So, I mean, so they have been very, very, very purposeful in how they manage their country and resources and all those kinds of things. So, if you could, okay. So, I have been there several times doing different kinds of work in the tourism industry. And so, late last year, I got an invitation saying that, Professor, we are going to organize lady business leaders, female business leaders conference in tourism in Muscat. Would you deliver the keynote? And I'm like, okay, this is very interesting. Think about it. I mean, a male from the US delivering the keynote for the female business leaders conference, you know, in tourism. And they made it very clear to me that this conference will be attended by very high-ranking government officials. So I'm like, okay, if I say anything, you know, that is deemed inappropriate, I mean, just to being facetious, I may come back to the U.S. without my head. So, so it is. I mean, you have to be very careful when you are dealing with that. And so here are the pictures from that business leaders conference. So if you could scroll down, Kurt, I will. Just scroll down. Yes. Scroll down more. Just stop here. Just stop here. So the woman in this picture, her name is Maita Al-Maruki. She is one of the 10 most powerful people in that country. She is actually in charge of all things tourism, because as the Middle East is actually reeling from the falling oil prices, many of their countries are now going to use tourism to expand their economy. And Oman has just announced a 25-year 2040 tourism strategy, and her office was basically responsible for creating that. So you are dealing with people at the highest levels of government, and she was the person who inaugurated that conference. And it was a fascinating look for me, even into the culture, especially in the context of gender in the Middle East, where things are so segregated. Because remember, just across the border from Oman in Saudi Arabia, you know, women are still being punished to 200 lashes for driving. Right? I mean, it is an incredible different kind of an environment. Whereas, of course, Sultan Qaboos, when he came to power, one of the first of his decrees was that all citizens are equal. And I remember the first thing when I landed in Muscat Airport, my first visit, I was awed by the fact with so many women driving, and which is where you don't get to see that a lot in many parts of the Middle East. So if you scroll down a little bit. Oh, look at that! Don't I look great, you know, on that stage? So. Scroll down a little bit. So as you can see that, you know, Her Excellency Maita Al-Maruki is, you know, she's like a rock star. I mean, it was great to see that. Of course, she's one of the first people in Oman to be educated at University of Oxford. You know, extremely intelligent, extremely well educated, and literally, especially in a very traditional patriarchal society, it is not easy for someone of her gender to rise, and she's also very young, to rise at such high levels. So, and there were a host of other government officials and other people. So you know, I had to be very, very careful. I actually had a few colleagues with me in the same event. They did not speak because I was the only person who was presenting at the conference, and I was literally kind of kind of scratching my head in a sense that I do not want to say anything that could, get potentially not only me in trouble, because it is not only about me, but I'm representing the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, which has lots of linkages in Oman. I do not know if you know this, that actually the government of Oman sends thousands of their students to the United States every year on a 100% scholarship. And as international students, they pay 300% more tuition. UNL is the home to one of the largest Omani student population. We have a direct business case not to jeopardize those kinds of relationships, in a sense that it is not only about altruism, it's not only about sharing our expertise, and historically these Omani students have found Lincoln very welcoming. So many of them will come to other schools in the US and then transfer to the UNL, because it's the reputation of Lincoln as a tolerant community and as a welcoming community that they have done that. So go ahead, please.
I think now that you said that, was invited to a dinner that maybe the Omani Student
Association, yes.
They put it on in the Union.
You're correct.
A few months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really quite a production with a little play and food and a lot of local dress.
Right.
Their local dress.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, historically, the students that were sent to the United States, they were the kind of the cream of the crop scholarships. They usually came in for STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and then after almost 2 years of work, we just got to hear from the embassy in Washington D.C., the Omani embassy, that they will now be adding hospitality tourism management to that scholarship. So you see, all of these things are interconnected. So it is just not only my head. There is more at stake here. That's what I'm trying to say. And once I finished the presentation, and because of, and here I was actually standing in their country telling them about their tourism. You see how touchy that it is. You have to be very careful that you do not come off as you are pontificating, or you are preaching to you are telling them what they already know. And basically, so I made sure that I used very solid models to show similar kinds of developments done in other parts of the world and all those kinds of things. And then at the end of my presentation, when I came back and sat down, she actually leaned front and looked at me and said, "Great presentation, can I have a copy?" And I'm like, okay, I get to keep my head. So that is absolutely fantastic. And the very next day, I actually had a meeting set up with her, because we are doing a second level, because what's happening is that as part of their 2040 strategy, they have this huge process program going on called Omanization. That means they want their own people to be trained to take charge of their economy. If you know anything about the Middle East, many of those countries are run by expatriates. I mean, it is the British and the Americans who run their oil business. It's the Indians and Pakistanis who are the labor and all those kinds of things. But they have now made a strategic decision that we need to train our own young people, to basically have the ability to manage all our country. So it's a gigantic enterprise, not only in terms of execution, but also the social mindset, because this is a very prosperous country. I mean, you will feel really poor when you go there, because one Omani rial is $3 American. So you can imagine. So it is exactly the opposite of going to vacationing in Thailand or somewhere where the US dollar seems like, oh my goodness, you exchange $100 at the airport and they give you this much of money. No, you get in the airport in Muscat, you give this much of American dollars, you get only this much of Omani money. So it's a very, very prosperous country. So I had set up that meeting to discuss with Her Excellency that how we could proceed and all of that. And that meeting, of course, took me 4 months to set up, because I had to answer, like, there were filters and gatekeepers who asked me, okay, what exactly do you want to talk about? What is it that you want to and do all of that stuff? Because when you are trying to access, this is almost equivalent to meeting the Secretary of Secretary of Commerce in the United States. So so definitely, I mean, I just can't put a phone call and say I'm just going to come meet this person next day. So next day, when my contact at the ministry took me there, she only walked me to door number, which I call door number 1, and said, I can take you only up to here. From here, somebody else is going to escort you. So after door number 4, I was actually ushered into a room of this size, where there were these very ornate sofas, and one of our executive assistants ushered me in and say, please go and sit on the sofa, on the first sofa on the left-hand side, and face 45 degrees towards the chair in the front, And so once again, I mean, when you're operating in a culture like that it is very formal, and of course, you are dealing with that. And he said that her advisors are going to come in first, and then Her Excellency is going to arrive. When she enters the room, please stand, and please do not shake hands. As you know, in our culture, it's very inappropriate to shake hands with a person of opposite gender. I'm like, okay, I got the memo, I'll make sure that my hands are in my pocket, and I stand up, and then 3 of our advisors troop into that room. They introduce themselves. They're all men, of course, and we are doing chit chat, and then I hear doors opening and stuff like that, and the retinue of people come in. And the funniest part is, so the room is very long, as you can imagine. She enters from that door, and comes diagonally straight to me, puts her hand out and say, hello, professor, how are you doing today? For a split second, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to, return? And I decided to take the risk and, basically shake her hand. And then the meeting was supposed to last for 30 minutes. It went on in 55 minutes, and we have become BFFs since. No, that's a lie. That's a lie. So I'm just saying that sometimes, yes, I mean, you have to, when you're operating in the context of other cultures, sometimes taking risk can be purposeful, but you have to wait for the cue, in a sense that when you are told that please do not shake hands. I mean, I have traveled to Middle East so many times. I've gone, Sharjah, Dubai, all of these places I know better. But the fact of course, she's Western educated, lived, in Europe for a long time and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is, when she gave me the cue that it was okay to shake hands with her, that was fantastic. And even while I was leaving, she shook hands too, and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, that I mean, since then, of course, I have been email contacts with her office and so on and so forth. And I mean, again, going back there soon to get started on this very big project. I just wanted to share this story with all of you to show you that intercultural communication kit that we are talking about, that it really does operate, it really does work that way if you know how to follow the model. If I had been different, in a sense that, without even taking the cue, I was like going on and shaking hands or saying inappropriate things or all those kinds of things that could have jeopardized a business relationship between the institution that I represent and this very major government that we are dealing with. Fun stuff, huh? Very, very fun stuff. So, and so, can we go to the next slide? Yeah. But now, I'll demonstrate that even in cultures that are very similar. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. I have it in my hand. So, see, I just get carried away by my stories sometime, Cart. No, yeah, sure. Thank you. So, this is another story that I think is very, very important, even in cultures that cultures that are very close to us. Last year in October, I took a group of students for a conference and education abroad trip to the UK. And sometimes I say, when you can't communicate verbally, you can use other methods to communicate your greetings. Look at this hotel in Manchester, England. They created a white chocolate welcome from University of Nebraska, for University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Isn't this cool? Like, yeah, they're like all, so it is absolutely beautiful that you could actually eat that. Many of my students thought that it was not edible. I said, no, it's white chocolate, go eat it. I mean, it's edible film. So each of our rooms, when we checked in at the Lowry Hotel in Manchester, they had a sign like that. Small things, but it makes so much of a difference. Once again, like you do not need to make a lot of effort. You need, and I talk a lot about creative economy, and this is a great example of a creative economy where you can basically use elements of the creative economy and still communicate to your intended audience. So as someone is coming and coming to stay at your hotel for 6 days, just put this thing and say welcome. But I have to tell you this story about, do you take American money? Anybody here been to Manchester, England? So you have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, was it recently or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I flew there on May 18th.
Oh, so you are there, yeah. Manchester is a very interesting city. I mean, it's in northern England, and yeah, I mean, that's where Rolls and Royce met in a little bar, and the Rolls-Royce company was started. Manchester is one of those post-industrial British cities. Now it's going through a kind of a rejuvenation, in a sense that there's a rebirth happening. And Manchester is also a college town, very much. They have like 3 universities, so a lot of young people. So our students are having, a great time, and like I do, every morning I'm taking a debrief that, what the level of notoriety they have achieved, in terms of where they are. So 2 of my students tell me that they had a very bad experience at one of the local bars last night, and I said, what happened? And then one of them proceeds to tell me this story. So they had ordered some drinks and food and something like that, and then one of their debit cards was not working. So they asked the bartender, these are good folks from middle of Nebraska, that do you take American money? And when they asked that question, both the bartenders stopped what they're doing. They looked at them and said, "This is not America. We do not take American money." So it was absolutely fascinating, because when we talk about tourist behavior or tourist perception, that was a stereotype of the American tourists who think that the world operates as per the United States, and everywhere they will take our money. And then I'm like, and my students were like, the poor thing. They were literally very, very hurt at the rudeness. So I sat them down and said, so suppose, a person from Germany comes to Lincoln and they go to Laszlo's, and after eating, they say, we want to pay with German money. Are we going to take them? No, we don't take German money. Then how do you expect them to take American money? And then they got it. Oh yeah. I'm like, yes. So once again, sometimes when you communicate in the context of certain cultures, this comes off as that, look at that, that arrogant American tourists. They think that the world is their colony. Well, UK is the 51st state anyway. So my students were not that off the mark. A great example, in a sense, that when you prepare to basically operate in a foreign country or culture, have these basic nuances. That's the reason when we take students in many of these education abroad programs, we do these kinds of preparations. But these trips will not be fun if some of these instances would not happen. It will become very boring. So it is incredible, and it's a great learning experience for our young students to develop a global view that, oh yeah, I'm traveling to a foreign country. Why would they accept our money? Because we don't accept theirs. That question. And when we talk about in the context of creative economy, during this study tour, I took my students to the Langham Hotel in London, where the British afternoon tea was invented 150 years ago, and they were actually celebrating the 150th year of the British afternoon tea, and we did a 4-hour, 7-course afternoon tea experience for our students. And Cherish Finden, who is the chef at the Langham, she's incredible, and she was basically telling us that how great it was to basically kind of rejuvenate that and create the whole concept of the 150 years afternoon tea. Something very interesting happened there. I made sure that all of our students were very well dressed. As you can see, the girls are all dressed like proper English ladies in hats and stuff like that. This is a super 5-star environment, of course, that is important. But then as the servers were coming, they were picking up their napkins and putting them on your lap nicely. One of my students said that, oh my God, I don't want him to touch me and put the napkin. I'm like, settle down, you know? That's very rude to say to somebody on your face that I don't want you to touch. They're not even touching you. They're just picking up the napkin from your table and putting it. So once again, you know, when you are operating in a context of a given culture, you have to have that situational intelligence or emotional intelligence and ask those kinds of questions. Some of you remember that from last year that I talked about, you know, when I've taken students to places like Dubai, you know, and I've taken them to places like the Burj Al Arab Hotel, which is the most luxurious hotel in the world. This is a wholly different kind of a environment that you operate. That, you know, don't you like the Nebraska flags where we go? You know, here we are in the royal suite of the Burj Al Arab. $45,000 a night it costs, this suite, and there we are, you know, claiming it as if it belongs to UNL. So, and so once again, this is a very different kind of an environment because, you know, with that kind of opulence, you are looking at bathrooms which has all real gold fittings, which is the size of your apartment, with gold-plated TVs in every room. That's why I always tell students, please do not touch anything here, because if you break, all of us has to, you know, wash dishes for the rest of our, I do not know, for, you know, rest of our lives. But you know, I have friends who work there. I mean, this hotel caters to super billionaires, heads of state, and those kinds of stuff. I always ask them that how do you communicate? What are some of your communicating 101? And this is the person in the middle is my acquaintance, Jelena, and she was telling me in their training they're always told that whenever a guest says something, the air conditioning in my room is not working, never say no problem. Never say no problem. Say of course or absolutely I will take care of it. A guest is not a problem. Especially in a culture like that, when you are dealing with people who are going to pay $45,000 for a room for a night, you know, they are not a problem. They make your paycheck, right? I mean, so I'm just saying that's how you actually operate in those kinds of cultures. And lastly, I want to quickly touch upon communicating with technology. I know Jerry talked about how to talk to teenagers, how to talk to millennials. Who here have read the Meeker report that came out on June 1st? Who knows what's the Meeker report? All right. Mary Meeker is one of the partners at the Silicon Valley venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins. She every year puts out this report called Internet Trends. And all of you being professional communicators, I strongly encourage you to download it from the internet and read it. It's 193 pages, so but it has a wealth of information. This year's report gives you a snapshot of what's happening in the world of communication. For example, with 277 million users, India just surpassed the United States as the second largest internet market in the world. So, you know, it is a whole different reality that we are talking about. And as I was briefing my students on the India study tour, I was telling them that it would be very common for them to find villages in India where there is no running water or toilets, but everybody has a cell phone, and the bank by phone features in India is probably 200 years advanced than what we have in the US. Because remember, necessity sometimes is the mother of invention, because, you know, in those societies, you know, you do not have access to physical branches of banks. They're so remote, but the farmer still needs to do their banking and stuff like that, and the apps that they have created is incredible power, and so you see how communication is to be driven. Also, where communication is moving: video, image, messaging. So if you are not on Snapchat, get on it. Like, you know, after we are done. Also, the sophistication of the video and the image is incredible when talking about things like Periscope and all those kinds of things. That's fascinating. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And what's happening, especially with when you are communicating in this creative economy, is that I will end with an example which captures very well the concept of the video, a sophistication of a narrative, and then storytelling and creativity, and how now brands are using basically their consumers or customers to basically communicate on their behalf. So can we play this last video?
Hi, I'm Chris Hearn, the CEO and co-founder of Mercantile Capital Corporation, and today I want to tell you a short customer service story that I think will warm your heart as much as it has mine. And that's that about 6 weeks ago, during my kids' spring break, I was in Los Angeles on business, so we decided to send my wife and my 2 kids up to Amelia Island Plantation, to the Ritz-Carlton there. And they did what a lot of people do when they drive somewhere on vacation, which is they forgot to bring some of the stuff home. Well, what they left behind was my son's, effectively his teddy bear / blanket. It's kind of one of these things, it's a combination with a little teddy bear head and a kind of a blanket. And he puts it on his pillow every night. He's had it there for, I don't know, since he was probably 1.5 years, 2 years old. He's 8 now. He'd hate me telling you this story just because he's kind of an athletic, cool kid, but hopefully one day he'll appreciate this. So what happened? Well, I came home, was putting him to bed the first night, and turns out we didn't have his Joshie. That's what he calls it. It's a giraffe. And he was inconsolable, and so I did what a lot of dads do when your son is inconsolable, which is I made up a big whopper, a big lie, and told him that surely Joshie just wanted to stay on the vacation for a few extra days and go play golf and hang by the pool and things like that. So I finally get him to bed. He stops crying. I tell my wife what happens. She said, well, we just got a phone call. They found him in the laundry, which is great. So now I call up there and ask to speak to someone about this to give them sort of my imaginative idea and see if they can actually do this. So I talk to Aaron at Loss Prevention Control, and I tell him what I told my son and to see if he can actually do it. Well, a couple days later in the mail comes Joshie. Well, it doesn't just come with Joshie. He has a lot more to it. In fact, here's the first thing that we saw. Joshie gets a laminated card, the Ritz-Carlton, Loss Prevention. That was the first thing. Then we get a binder. Joshie, a photo of him right there on there at the Ritz. Okay? So here's what's inside it, and this is where it really gets kind of fun. Hey Riley, we just wanted to let you know that we found this little guy hanging around the pool and thought that you might recognize him. I thought this one was terrific because that was exactly one of my ideas. Put some sunglasses on Joshie and pretend like he hung by the pool. Joshie told us he was having a lot of fun with some new friends like Amelia the parrot, but missed his ride home with you. So there you go. Some friends and Amelia the parrot. Next one is one of my favorites. Joshie decided that since he was going to be at the hotel for a few more days that he would get in some much needed relaxation. I love the cucumbers on a teddy bear. And second to last, after a day of relaxing, we asked Joshie if he would want to help us in the loss prevention office. Of course he said yes, so we made him an honorary LP officer, and he helped patrol the hotel and keep all the other guests safe. I think that's just great, having him sit there and watch the monitors. And last, he even got to drive on the beach. After a day of helping, Joshie decided it was time to go home, so we thanked him for a job well done, and he jumped in a box and returned home to you. So, this is the little guy right here. This is Joshie. This is, I got to sneak him home actually tonight so my son doesn't know I filmed this video, because it's the kind of thing he thinks that I did this on purpose, which I technically did, but he'll appreciate more probably in 15 years. I think this was a great customer service thing that the Ritz-Carlton did at Amelia Island. I'm eternally grateful, my wife and I both are, to Aaron, the Loss Prevention Office. We're definitely going to send this into Ritz-Carlton Corporate, and I hope you share this nice little story about what people can do when they want to provide fanatical customer service. This is the kind of thing that we try and strive for here at Mercantile, and hopefully you do in your small business as well daily. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming next time, but this was just one of those stories I had to share with you because it shows that sometimes when people go above and beyond the call of duty, just how magical they can make these things. So thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll share this with some people and make their day. Take care.
So this is a great example of how brands are now communicating, via even their consumers. So I hope that today's session about communicating across cultures was helpful. And thank you once again for inviting me. If there are questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Go ahead.
More chaperones for all your trips.
The list is already quite long. Thank you.
Just one question. The director of tourism at Oman, is she in personal danger because of the high-profile role that she's assumed within the larger geography? There aren't as accepting of women being taking the leadership role that she has taken on.
I really don't know the answer to that question. but geopolitics is so complicated.
Right.
So we'll see. I mean, just like most of the countries there's a lot of churning going on. So we'll see. But right now it seems she's pretty well settled.
Very encouraging.
Yeah. Her title actually is Undersecretary for the ministry. So yeah. Any other questions or comments?
How long have you been at UNL?
4 years.
And how long have you been in the United States?
15.
And coming from your background, what was some of the things you noticed about our culture that was interesting for you?
I did talk about the concept of timeliness or those kinds of things, and also once again the task orientated versus the more relationship orientated. I would say that was the first adjustment, in a sense that in many Asian cultures you do not speak your mind, in a sense that you do not give direct feedback. You're just trying to be polite and not ruin a relationship. So that kind of things. So yeah, thank you for that. Anything else? Oh, sure.
Please do.